Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up show for the absolutely massive game on Wednesday night. That is Liverpool against PSG at the Parc des Princes in Paris in a game that could potentially decide which of those two teams goes through to the knockout stages of the Champions League. A little bit of an update on how the group stands. You've currently got Liverpool and Napoli level at the top, both with 6 points. PSG just 1 point below them with 5 points. Ignore the fact that that's gone off. It will do it throughout the video. It's quite annoying. But anyway, PSG on 5 and then Red Star Belgrade just 1 point below them on 4 points. So it is, out of all the Champions League groups, about as finely balanced going into these last two games as it could possibly be. However, should Liverpool win on Wednesday night, we could all but secure qualification, barring a freak result in which I think Red Star would have to actually beat Napoli in Napoli to actually keep them in the competition. But if they draw or lose to Napoli and Liverpool beat PSG, then that is PSG out the competition. They are out regardless of what happens in the Red Star game if they do lose to Liverpool. And that could be Liverpool through to the knockout stages of the Champions League. Now, how incredible would that be for us to knock out Neymar, Cavani, MBAPPE, even Gianluigi Buffon down into the Europa League in our second to last game in the group and secure qualification on their own backyard as well. That would be absolutely incredible, I think it's fair to say. So there is plenty riding on this game, and also in the unlikely event that Liverpool do lose this game, then we will have an absolutely crunch tie, it's likely, against Napoli in that final game, where we would probably have to beat them by 2 goals. Now, if anyone thinks that situation sounds familiar, it's pretty much the exact same situation we ended up with when we beat Olympiacos 3-1 with that phenomenal Gerrard belter late on in the game all those years ago when we actually ended up winning the competition in Istanbul. So not necessarily the end of the world if we do lose, but it would put us in a very, very difficult situation coming into that final game against Napoli at home, which we absolutely wouldn't want. So fingers crossed Liverpool can get the business done this weekend. Not this weekend, this Wednesday night even. And also end a lot of talk about our poor away form in Europe, because after the game against Red Star, there was this stat that was being wheeled out about how we'd lost our last 3 games now, away games even in Europe. And you've got to caveat with the fact that when we lost in Rome, we still technically won because we ended up in a Champions League final off the back of it. The Napoli game, obviously that was annoying. We lost 1-0. Really, we should have just ground out that 0-0, but unfortunately we lost focus right at the end. And then of course you've got that absolute horror show against Red Star Belgrade. So it'd just be really nice for us to prove that Liverpool don't have a problem away from home in Europe, because originally that certainly wasn't the case. Originally, away from home, we were actually pretty good because it meant that teams came out against us and we were able to counter-attack on them, and it basically actually played into our hands at times playing away from home against big European sides. So I think it would be really important to get a win on Wednesday night just to send out that kind of message, and also send out a message to the rest of Europe, because obviously PSG are still one of the favourites to win this competition. They have got so many fantastic players at their disposal that I think everyone does see them as a team that people expect to see to get to the quarterfinals, maybe even the semi-finals as well. So to dump them down into the Europa League or potentially out of Europe altogether at such an early stage would send out a huge statement of where Liverpool hope to be in the business end of this tournament. So team news going into the game: Joe Gomez is expected to be fit after missing out in the game against Watford. By the sounds of it, it never really was a huge injury and he probably could have played that game at the weekend, but it was just that it was a slight knock, and both Lovren and Trent Alexander-Arnold were at full fitness, so there was no reason to risk Joe Gomez, but he is going to be absolutely fine for this game. Adam Lallana is also expected to be fit again, although I'll be perfectly honest, I can't see him playing any sort of role in this match whatsoever. And I'm also thinking that Jordan Henderson is probably quite likely to start in this match, simply because after his sending off against Watford, it's unlikely that he'll play against Everton. So with rotation probably starting to become quite a big deal for Liverpool with the sheer amount of games in this festive schedule, I think it's highly likely that Henderson will be brought in for this game and then someone else will take his place in the derby. So as for how I think we are actually going to line up, I think it is obviously, of course, it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal, and then the defence I think is going to be Dejan Lovren and Virgil van Dijk as the centre-back pairing. And then I think we're going to play Joe Gomez at right back, simply because I think as much as we need to consider counter-attacking in this game, and I think it's important that we don't sit back and allow PSG to come onto us too much, because we could quite easily lose control of the match if we end up doing that. I do think we're going to have to be very, very careful defensively, because especially with it being away from home, PSG are probably going to be the dominant side. They're probably going to see more of the ball. They're probably going to spend quite a lot of time in our half. So I think we need as many defensively sound players on the pitch as possible. And, you know, Trent Alexander-Arnold is great, and he played really, really well up against Neymar last time out. But Neymar is a fantastic footballer, especially on home turf. So I think having Joe Gomez and then essentially Dejan Lovren sort of double up on him a little bit, I think that would really help us make sure that PSG never really get a foothold going forward. And I also think Dejan Lovren up against Cavani, that is the kind of battle he relishes. He relishes being up against a strong, physical centre forward that's going to battle him in the air, that's going to try and shove him off the ball. That's what he loves doing. That's what Dejan Lovren is best at. So I think this game with a player like Cavani up against him really lends itself to having Dejan Lovren start. And then, of course, Van Dijk is absolutely fantastic. And then Andrew Robertson is nailed on to start. There is no way that we are going to ever risk Alberto Moreno up against Kylian Mbappe. So that is how I think the back line's going to line up. The midfield, I think we go with a midfield three for this game, because while the 4-3-3 hasn't really been our friend over the last few games, you know, looking at the Red Star game, it really didn't work. The Arsenal game as well, it never really felt like it got going. I do think with the way this game is going to set up, and I'll come on to PSG and how I think they're going to play a little bit later, I think the midfield three actually suits us better. So I think we should go with Henderson at the base of that, then Gini Van Alden a bit further forward, and then James Milner completing that three as well. Three very physical, very strong, very take the game to the opposition type of players that I think this sort of game and the way Liverpool will set up to win will absolutely suit down to the ground. So I think that is your midfield three, and then the front three, you go full strength. Of course you go full strength. There is no way in hell that either of these three players shouldn't be starting this game. It's Salah, Firmino and Mane. And then of course Shaqiri is an option, and some people will say that we should go into the 4-2-3-1 to accommodate him, but I think he will be a great impact sub later on as PSG legs start to tire, to have someone like him to run at them. So that's the Liverpool team then, but how are we expecting PSG to line up and set themselves up tactically for this game? The big news that every Liverpool fan was concerning themselves with throughout this week so far has been the fitness of Neymar and Kylian Mbappe, because both of them did sustain injuries that looked a little bit nasty, I think it's fair to say, on international duty, especially Kylian Mbappe's. The way he falls on that shoulder, I was actually expecting him to be out for a while, because I thought it looked about as bad as Mohamed Salah's did, and Mohamed Salah sort of kept him away, certainly from full fitness, for quite a while. You know, even when he came back for the World Cup about a month later, he wasn't exactly ready. So I expected Kylian Mbappe at least to not be available for this game. But from what Thomas Tuchel has been saying in his press conferences so far, and obviously this could all change over the next few days because the managers will do press conferences, I think it's on Tuesday afternoon, and we'll get a much clearer picture of fitness then. But before the weekend, even though both of them did miss out in Paris Saint-Germain's game against, I believe it was Toulouse they played against this weekend, they sat that out, but Tuchel has said that he's expecting both of them to be available, at least in some capacity, for this game. Although the way he worded it was very interesting, in that he did seem to kind of say that Neymar, he was mainly talking about Neymar, he didn't actually say that much about Mbappe, but they sort of come hand in hand because both of them got injured at the same time, and they're both equally crucial to Paris Saint-Germain's plans in their European campaign. But the way he was talking about Neymar, it was almost like he said he doesn't actually think Neymar will be ready, and he doesn't think he will be 100% fit, but he thinks that Neymar will either way demand to be played, essentially. And we know how big Neymar's status is in Paris Saint-Germain, and while there is this whole no player is ever bigger than any sort of club, Neymar I think does push that at PSG because he is so crucial to their idea of becoming one of the European super clubs. So I think if Neymar demands to play, then Tuchel's probably not going to stand in his way, and I think likewise with Kylian Mbappe. Now of course this is incredibly worrying news for any Liverpool fan, because both of them are fantastic footballers, and even though neither of them really set the game alight at Anfield, Neymar certainly had a few flashes where he ran at our defence, and I think everyone's bums clenched ever so slightly, and also Kylian Mbappe scored a pretty nice goal. So both of them are threats, even if they're not playing incredibly well, and even if they're not at 100%. But if you are looking for something to be positive about, I think the fact that they aren't 100% fit, and the fact that both of them might play could end up actually playing into Liverpool's hands, because like Barcelona last season when they got done by Roma away from home, they have two players in Neymar and Mbappe, and with Barcelona it was Messi and Suarez, who don't really do that much defensive work at all. And with PSG normally playing a 4-3-3, you do need your wingers to do just a little bit. I'm not saying they need to be extra fullbacks. I'm not saying they should go full Mourinho, but as Liverpool fans, we know we like to see Salah and Mane track back, especially in big games like this, and you just can't expect Neymar and Mbappe to do that, especially at the Parc des Princes. They will not be expecting to do any defensive work, and I think that, if Liverpool take advantage of it, could really, really play into our hands. And I think it's so important that we are brave and purposeful in our counter-attacks in this game, because it's something we haven't really done well enough so far this season. And I think it was the downfall of us in the game against Napoli, to be honest. I think there were opportunities in that game where they were a little bit open, but we just didn't show any confidence going forward. We didn't show any purpose to get the ball forward as quickly as possible. And that's where maybe that shout to play Xherdan Shaqiri comes in, because he has been Liverpool's most creative force so far this season. But I just think that midfield, if they can summon up the kind of form they showed in the back end of last season, and we basically do need to treat this like one of those Champions League knockout games away from home where we counter-attacked so well, we took advantage of the opposition leaving spaces round the back so incredibly well. And I think if Liverpool can do that, if Jurgen Klopp drills it into them this week, that as soon as you win the ball back, as soon as you get it, whether you're a midfielder, a defender, or one of the attackers, straight away, look for the most difficult pass. Look for the pass that you think is actually most likely not going to come off, but if it does come off, it will set us on a really, really solid counter-attack, because PSG will give us enough opportunities there. I am sure of it. You know, they are a fantastic side, but with the way they play, they will leave spaces open at times that we will be able to exploit. And if we keep trying to exploit it, even if sometimes it doesn't work, there will be times where that ball over the top reaches Mane or reaches Salah or reaches Firmino, and then we are away and we will have fantastic chances to win this game. And, you know, you can worry about the fact that if we do let PSG onto us, if we do sort of invite them onto us so that we have the space for the counter-attack, then they will start to create chances as well. But Liverpool's defence has been absolutely fantastic this season. PSG are one of only two teams who've actually scored more than one goal against us this season, apart from Chelsea in the League Cup, but who's really counting that, because that was basically our defence from 2 years ago anyway, not the defence that has been so good so far this season. So if we remain tight at the back, which I fully rely on us to do, then we can take advantage of how much they will come out and try and attack us. And I'm also think that's why that midfield three is so crucial as well, because PSG are not used to games of this intensity. I think it showed when they played us at Anfield. It showed when they played both of their games against Napoli as well. The best performance they've put in the Champions League this season was against Red Star at home, because that is the kind of game that PSG play on a weekly basis against teams that are nowhere near as good as them and will quite often lie down and take a beating. Liverpool aren't going to do that this weekend, and I think if we start the game really, really fast, if we start it with a high intensity, and that's why I think that midfield three is so crucial, because all of them are capable of starting fast and starting physical. It's what was so good for us in Europe last season. I think if we start the game like that, PSG will never be able to settle, and if we counter-attack using that kind of intensity, then we might not even win this game. We could end up running absolutely riot. So I think while a lot of people will be worried going into this game, because of course PSG are fantastic, the crucial thing to remember is that they need the win more than we do. A draw isn't actually necessarily that bad for Liverpool. With a draw, we can go into that game against Napoli and think all we need is a win. We don't necessarily have to win by 2 goals or something like that to beat them on the head-to-head rule. We just need to get 3 points in the game against Napoli. So a draw suits Liverpool far better than it suits Paris Saint-Germain. And of course, they will be so terrified of losing and going down into the Europa League, because that would represent an absolute catastrophe for them this early on in the season. So I think that will play into our hands. I think as long as we take advantage of it, and as long as we counter-attack with the kind of devastating force we know this Liverpool side can counter-attack with, then I think we could come away not just with a win, but with a huge statement that will ring around the whole of Europe going into the knockout stages of the Champions League later on in the season. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. I'm sorry I've been a bit nasal, but I have got a cold at the moment, so sorry about that. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you did still enjoy the video, despite my nasal voice and all my sniffing, then do hit that like button down there if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter. And I'll be back Wednesday night after we've hopefully battered Paris Saint-Germain and might even be in the knockout stages already for the Champions League. Until then, bye for now.